calling all instructional coaches, curriculum specialists, teachers on special assignment, or whatever they call you. I'm Matteo Souza.
And I'm Katie Ritter. As instructional coaches, we are often responsible for our own professional learning and can sometimes feel pretty isolated in our role.
That's why we're here, bridging the gap with a wealth of tips, tricks, and building a community of coaches.
So hit the restart button with us.
Recharge your coaching batteries.
And hopefully you'll leave feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
Hello and welcome, fellow coaches, teachers, and education leaders. On today's agenda, the art of community building within our schools and districts. How do we knit that close-knit fabric amongst teachers, staff, and students? We're breaking down strategies for fostering collaboration, trust, and a sense of belonging, both in person and online. Gear up for an episode that's all about bringing people together.
I am so excited to introduce a previous podcast guest that we had on early in season 2, I believe, talking about the coach-admin relationship. Today, we are joined by Andrea Carovillano, a seasoned educator with 15 years under her belt, spanning 1st to 8th grades. For the past 5 years, she's been the driving force as the instructional technology coach for her district, Monroe Local Schools. I get tongue-tied every time I say it. Calling it the ultimate professional growth experience. Outside of the classroom, Andrea's life is rich with family joys, celebrating 16 years of marriage, congratulations, and raising 3 beautiful children. Not just academically inclined, she has also recently earned her blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Watch out, people, showcasing her dedication to personal growth. Andrea, we are so excited to have you back on the podcast. We were talking earlier. You mentioned how last time we were all just sitting around a conference table. Now we're in a little mini podcast studio. So we're happy to have you along with us for the growth of the pod here. But because we are kind of a long time, you are an early guest on the podcast, we have a little insight to your work that you've done in community building, which is why I think you will be a really great guest for our listeners to learn from this week. But before we dive into kind of that background, from your opinion or your standpoint, what role do you think an instructional coach, whether they're a technology coach, like the role you serve, or maybe general instruction or content, what role does a coach play in nurturing an environment of lifelong learning and growth mindset with the staff within their school community?
Well, first, I want to say thanks for having me back. It's great to be here. I think the most important role that a tech coach or just an instructional coach in general can have to kind of nurture, and especially thinking that growth mindset, is really just celebrating the wins of our staff. So a lot of times, especially if you have some people who are a little bit more apprehensive to try out new things, celebrating the wins, the successes of the people who are maybe taking a risk in their opinion, or just trying something new, and just giving them a shout out through email, or a little postcard or a post-it note or something in their room can kind of help them and encourage them in making sure that they feel that their work has been, well, 1, celebrated, and 2, also noticed. So I think that's part of building that community, is making sure that people understand that they're a part of that bigger school, that bigger district, or whatever it is, and that those things that they're doing in their classroom matter. So celebrating those wins, I think, is a big thing. I also think that it's important that we kind of meet people where they're at. So a lot of times when I'm working with either an individual teacher or a group, grade level or something like that, I'm trying to kind of ascertain exactly what it is that they are looking for to kind of almost make a for the greater good, I guess. So I have some teachers, for example, who, when they work with me personally, they'll try and put together some sort of, professional goal. And a lot of times that professional goal is, well, what's going to help my team? What's going to help our building move forward in whatever this particular thing is. So they try and figure out what's maybe frustrating, what's maybe a problem for them, but also, hey, what can I do that's also going to help others with this same issue? So it's kind of nice to be able to see that community growth as well.
That's awesome. So in like the ideal world, that we're all striving to achieve. How would you, like Brene Brown always says, paint done, right? How would you paint done for this like ideal school community working relationship between coaches and teachers and everybody kind of supporting each other in their growth and learning? What would that look like for
Sounds
you?
like utopia, doesn't it?
I know, yeah. Well, we
Um,
got to put it out there if we want to make any progress toward it, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think done looks like just teachers almost working in harmony. I know it sounds weird or it sounds kind of like cliche, I guess. I don't know. But to have staff who want to work together to help balance their workload because everybody has things to take home and that's not necessarily how you want to spend your home time and things like that. So when you can work together to plan, to make copies even, to use your own personal time to also help that team, I think that's kind of what an ideal community looks like because you are like it takes a village, I guess it's that whole saying. You want people working together, having that professional discourse, but also having fun together. I think a lot of our grade level teams, for example, they always eat lunch together. And I love like being able to be there with them when they're eating lunch because they're not talking about school. They're talking about, having fun. They're talking about the things they do in their personal lives. And it's not just always about school, which is nice because everyone, you need that break every once in a while.
That's a great,
But they have those relationships that they've built. Sorry, can you say
yeah,
that again?
great little relationship building nugget for people,
Yeah,
right? Keep them
exactly.
coming.
You don't want to necessarily start with the teacher. You know what I mean? You kind of want to start with the person, who's the person behind the teacher, get to know those people, and then I think having those relationships at the forefront and at the start, I think really help that community as well because it's not just I'm going to walk into the room and I'm going to demand these this and that. I'm going to talk to the person. I'm going to tell them what I need. I'm going to tell them what we could do to work together. And I think having that relationship first is the basis of
Yeah,
that.
that's great.
I think that's a really good point, right? Because you have to build that relationship first in order to have the credibility from those teachers and to then make any changes.
Yeah,
I also
absolutely.
think it's very interesting. We want to give our listeners options to see strategies and things that have been put in place. We've heard so many things about you and putting teacher groups together as one way to build that community. Because as a coach, you are taking the bigger view, right, from up top, and you're trying to build a community up top. So can you tell us a little bit more about teacher groups that you've set up?
Yeah, so normally it's grade level teams or departmental teams and things like that in those upper grade levels. Again, a lot of it stems from those teachers themselves. They already kind of have that mentality of like, if I'm going to be working on this, let's let others benefit from that work and let's share the different resources and materials that we made. For example, our first grade team is great with that. They'll have one person who makes copies for everybody, somebody who does planning and shares, and somebody who does different resources. And right now, actually, with two of the teachers that I'm working with in my ed tech cohorts or my coaching cycles, they're actually kind of redeveloping their math and their writing units because we this year have started using our Clever Touch panels. And so we're kind of still not really rolling those out. The primary has them, they've been using them, but they're still kind of learning how can I use these better. And so those teachers are kind of taking on work with me to help their entire grade level with those more interactive ways of using the panels and things like that. So I have a lot of teachers that kind of already have that mindset, which is great. And if you don't have necessarily everybody on board in that same mentality, I think it's great to start with those people and then just, through word of mouth, start talking about ways that, everyone can kind of, I guess, get on board.
That's interesting. Andrea, would you say, because I see like that sounds amazing. I have been in buildings where there's no way that would be the mindset of other
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
right? Like for whatever reason, that's just not the culture. So I'm just really interested, you've been at Monroe for a long time. Has it sort of just always been that way and that's been the culture? Or would you say are maybe like the biggest contributing things to that sort of like community, we're all in this together for the good of the group culture that it sounds like you all have there? Like if someone's listening and they don't have this culture, what is it you would tell them to start doing, or little seeds that they could start planting to move to more of this kind of a culture?
Hmm. First off, we are pretty lucky here at Monroe. We've had a few different superintendents over. I've been here for 8 years, I think. We've had a few different ones, retired and so forth. And so they all come in and go. Monroe is like a different. It's a horse of a different color, I guess. In that regard, they always keep saying, and I always just thought, oh, they're just biased. They're just kind of blowing smoke or whatever. But in reality, I think we are pretty lucky here because most of the staff is pretty well tightly knit, and they're really willing to work with each other on things. But if you're not lucky enough to come into a district that's already in that capacity, that's already working in that capacity, I think the biggest thing where you would start is just by trying to foster and exude that I'm here to help. I'm here to like work with you. And then it kind of works piece by piece. You know what I mean? You start working with, a teacher who's willing here, a teacher who's willing there. And then hopefully, again, through that word of mouth, it kind of snowballs. And if you celebrate those successes and start showing, the good that's coming from teachers trying something new or teachers planning together and collaborating, you start showing those, it can maybe start snowballing a little
Yeah.
bit, and really just making sure that the choices that you're making as a coach or the choices that you're helping teachers make for their own professional goals can also help benefit everybody, help benefit
I'm
others.
curious, when
um,
you say that in your coaching cycles, is there anything that you do as a part of, and I don't know exactly how you walk through it. Our team typically walks through kind of like a brainstorming planning session, right? Where teachers think of like challenges that they're facing in their day, and then we kind of help them sort
mhm.
through. I think you do something similar. And so I'm wondering if
I
that's part of
I
the
pretty much
process to guide them to choose something that like impacts the most people, right? Or like might have the biggest impact on their team. Is that something that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So every at the start of every cohort, I have a kickoff that everybody who volunteered or applied, I call it applied, but it's really just send out or like fill out the form, let me know you want you want to join. So anybody who fills out that form, we all meet, and then I do the gripe jam that actually Forward Edge kind of first showed us or showed me probably 2 or 3 years ago now at this point at an admin
Yeah,
retreat we
and
had over
it's
summer.
from the Google's certified coach curriculum. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's from where basically we give the teachers some time to think about, problems of practice. And then we lead them through, or I lead them through the organization of it. So, of all of these different things that you're thinking about, these different issues or these different goals that you might have, let's lay them out from what's least most or like least frustrating to you to most frustrating to you. So you can kind of get a spectrum of like how much is this really affecting myself, and then you then further it by kind of moving those post-its. I have them jot down on post-its those different ideas, and they move them up and down based upon how many people it actually affects. So is it highly frustrating and affecting a lot of people? Is it not really frustrating and only affects me, but it still might be something I'm really interested in pursuing? It gives the staff a second to kind of reflect on that, the good that they can do for many people, or perhaps even just their own set of students or something like that. But it gives them a chance to really hone in, I guess, on those
Mhm.
goals and make a smart decision on how they want to move forward in the coaching cycles.
Yeah.
We usually try and end it maybe just picking like maybe 2 or 3 kind of ideas to move forward with. It's not something that, hard and fast or anything
Yeah.
like that. It's not anything that they have to specifically choose by the end of that 30-minute kickoff, but at least gives them an idea of where they want to begin, so that at our very first official meeting, when it's just that teacher and myself, meeting during their plan time, it's not necessarily wasted. I want to say that word, but it's not used up with us just brainstorming some
Yeah.
ideas. And it's kind of fun to brainstorm with other people too in a big group and bounce ideas off of each other, rather than just sitting there in a one-on-one session and just telling me all the different things that are going wrong in the
Yeah.
classroom or problems of practice.
Well, I think it's interesting too. Like, I think that's a clever way, even just thinking about for our coaches who maybe aren't in a culture where people are just inclined to think about how can I help and sort of bear the burden this
Mhm.
time, but where my colleagues will benefit. I think a coach could really drive some of those guiding questions and maybe rephrase how they're even walking someone through that brainstorming session if it's formal coaching cycles or even just in other conversations. Is there something we could tackle together that would personally benefit you, but also your colleagues might benefit from too?
Just the idea of like once one person does something similar like that, like, hey, I think maybe 2 years ago I worked with a science teacher and we kind of revamped some science curriculum for her entire grade level. And now other people are doing the exact same thing with math and with writing and all of that. So it's kind of like once one person starts it and they realize, hey, this was very helpful to me, I'm going to return the favor. And I think that also starts to build that
Yeah,
community,
pay it
right?
forward.
Yeah,
That
Yeah.
exactly.
also matches what you said earlier. Like the coach is living the example of the community that you're trying to build, right? Because you have to be kind of that person that says, I'm here to help. I am here to do these things with you. And if you're living that, more people will probably give you the buy. And that totally makes sense to me too. I have
Yeah.
you had a question or would you?
Well, I wanted to ask her specifically about pivoting a little bit from kind of this like broader culture community building, which is great for lifelong learning, and coaches obviously value that. But I wanted to pivot a little bit and ask her specifically about like her technology. I forget the name of it, but I know you had formed like a technology leadership team kind of across the district to help. So I'd like to pivot and speak specifically to that team. So I'd like to think about community building in the sense of directly for our coaching audience, right? We have, you serve multiple buildings, Andrea. We have some coaches that are serving literally like 90 square miles bigger than some states for a single district, right? And there's only a couple of them. Or, districts that have literally tens of hundreds of buildings within their single district. So in that regard, building a community that's very specific to the work the coach is trying to engage in, and essentially like
Mhm.
building a community to help our coaches multiply themselves and duplicate their efforts. So I'd love if you could speak to some of that work that you did with your teams. And I know things change and it might not look exactly the same way today as I know it did previously, but the work you did, I was just so impressed with the teams you built that allowed you to essentially be in multiple places at once when you couldn't physically be in multiple places at once. You had other people kind of helping you carry out the work. And if you could just kind of speak to that and what that looked like in the process to get there, and maybe some of the highs and potentially some of the challenges too.
Sure. So our district always had building technology committees kind of in place, our BTCs. But prior to me and my role, they were kind of like official, but yet not. They didn't really meet very often. Some of the things that that the district envisioned overall was not getting down into the building level, I guess, if that makes sense. So, one of my big things when I first started in my tech coach role was to really try and get those building technology committees back on track. So, in each building, we have a teacher who is our lead technology committee person. And essentially, their job is to kind of what help, I guess, direct what that district vision is down into their
Mhm.
buildings. So if we have, let's say, a district vision, that building technology lead person is going to, make an agenda and make sure that what the district is seeing feeds down into the building. And then my job is to kind of help make sure that happens. So I attend all the district technology committee meetings, even though I don't lead them. And if they need help, obviously, like I'll help steer conversation and things like that, and help adjust or help make the agendas if necessary. But for the most part, those lead teachers are the ones who are driving the conversation and driving the information that's being handed out at those meetings. So, for example, our primary right now, we're focusing on, they have their clever touches, as you know. And since this is the first year for that, their main focus is how are we going to use these clever touches to really improve teaching, to supplement, to make things become interactive, engaging for students, and things like that. So we focused on making a plan. For example, what can we do this year that's going to help our teachers in this aspect? Elementary is kind of along the same route. We have a lead there who's always putting together, obviously, the agenda for us, and we're looking at all the different things. They're currently piloting Clever Touches, so a lot of our conversations this year are focused on that. So we actually have a set of like 9, I think, that we bought, and each grade level gets them for a month. And they're basically seeing like, hey, is this something that we actually want to like fully invest in? Get, ones for every building. How will it change? Things like that. I actually have a lunch and learn this afternoon with 6th grade because they're our last grade level to get them. So they're learning them yesterday and today, and then they get them next week for a month, and I just get to go in and help out. But mostly it's the buildings who are kind of in charge of, okay, well, if this is the vision we have for our building, how does it represent, what our district is going for, and how are we going to implement that in our own district or in our own building?
That's awesome. And did they do any support with like leading professional development on PD days?
They do occasionally. We haven't had a ton of like district whole building professional development this year. Last year we did that. We were talking, our big focus last year was SAMR, and the year before that, actually, we had wanted staff members to really start understanding that, when you're talking about technology, it's not just using it for tech's sake. To just because I have podcast mics and I can do a podcast doesn't mean I have to or that I should. It's more like, is this going to benefit your students in some way? And is the technology going to help, you get whatever it is, whatever learning objective you want your students to meet? Is the technology going to help you achieve that? And so in those 2 years of CMR, we had the building technology committee members. They were all in charge of some sort of aspect of helping with that large scale professional development, where they are running small groups or doing activities and kind of being front loaded with all that information so they could pass it on. So we kind of worked like top down almost. We have a district technology committee as well. So that's where, again, all those top level decisions are kind of made or discussed. And each of the building tech committee leads are a part of that committee, of the district committee as well. So they're always there in that conversation. They kind of know what's happening. And then they can, again, trickle that down into their building. And then the members in that building are usually a part of the training that happens, either during those larger professional development days or, with smaller things. They are there for somebody to reach out and, ask a quick question if they need help with something. They're great with, being the first ones to kind of jump in. If I'm not available, they'll be the first ones to jump in and say like, hey, try out this tool, or let's share this. I'm going to send out this email and give a shout out to this person because I saw them doing something great. So that committee, those leads and those members really do a great job at just making sure that it's not just me, in my, lone wolf over here. I don't have a huge district. We only have 4 buildings, but it's still only me, K-12. So the district technology committee members really try and pick up where I'm not able to help out.
I love that.
So.
I love that. Thank you for speaking to that.
This
sounds like a great, like, symbiotic relationship from district down into buildings that it really takes to move change. And it sounds like you guys have a really great working system.
Before we make any more people even more jealous of your school district and the place that you're working at, let's do a quick break. Let's jump into some ads and then we'll be right back.
Looking for a program that reaches all teachers in learning new tools to integrate in their lessons? Edu Badges is the answer. Edu is an anytime, anywhere badging program that is designed to take bite-sized tools for instruction and teach teachers how to use them. Edu has received the ISTE Seal of Alignment for Educator standards, and each badge in our expanding library is aligned to the ISTE standards and the SAMR model. Learn more about the program that teachers call addicting at forward-edge.net/edubadges.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here with Andrea Carovillano, and we are talking about building communities. Andrea, you've given us so many cool things and so many interesting perspectives. I have a rather like abstract question a little bit. A lot of what we've talked about so far, I think it exists on somewhat of a spectrum, right? There's a lot of what do we do as a group, and how do I grow this by letting people make their own choices and have input and build this on their own, versus on the other side, especially if it's not the perfect community, telling and having to tell people what to do next in order to build that community. That's a big strong difference between those two. Can you give us a little bit of advice on how to maybe handle the other part? How do we strike that balance between telling and building and supporting that way?
I think it's important to handle those types of challenges by meeting people where they're at. For example, not every grade level or every department is going to be on board in the same way. So you might have some, like our first grade team that I mentioned earlier, who is, they're a fantastically collaborative team. They work together, they help each other out. And then you also might have departments that aren't as cohesive. So I think by meeting people and meeting teams where they're at and not forcing, you know what I mean, and saying this is the direction you're going to go and being, strict about that, it's kind of making sure that there's a happy medium. Like, okay, we need to push a little bit, but at the same time, I need to respect the apprehension or respect the ideas that teacher has for their classroom. I'm not an expert, let's say, in, high school social studies or something like that. Social studies, not at all. But you get the idea that these are these teachers, or you have to have the idea that these teachers are the experts in their classroom. So I might be, quote, the expert on the tech side of things and how we can incorporate into the classroom. They're going to know their students better than I will. They're going to know their curriculum better than I do. And it's important to kind of meet them and have that conversation where, okay, let's try this, but maybe tweak it a little bit. Let's push a little bit, but not too much, that kind of thing. Well, one example I have going back to our technology committees is we actually, and sometimes it's not even just, the teacher apprehension that you have as a challenge. Sometimes it's the union contract, right? So we had some teachers who were concerned about, the extra effort that they were putting in and how that worked with the contract. Was there going to be payment? Was there going to be, those hours and things? And so that contract, that union, or what we had, played a specific role in changing how one of our BTCs actually works. So rather than having, monthly meetings where we're all monthly meetings where we're face to face, we scaled it back to quarterly. And sometimes we meet over Zoom if that works better for everybody. Sometimes we meet in person if that works better. And we really tried to control that time that was going to be required of those teachers in that particular situation, just because there was that, that union contract type question. So some of those challenges I think they just have to be met with flexibility and the understanding that not everything's going to be exactly how I envision it, but it's going to be what's best for that particular building, that particular person, or the situation at hand.
That's great. Let me ask you this. You unfortunately, you hypothetically leave your current district, you come to a brand new school, a brand new building, with all your experiences, with everything that you've done so far. What are the first three things that you do when you jump in? How would you start in a brand new building?
I would try and be visible. That would probably be my very first thing, because I've been told I'm fairly friendly. So when I try and make sure that I establish those relationships first, like talking to somebody, if they got recently married, congratulations, how was your wedding, those types of things, and not being so business-like. And while that business side of me is definitely more of, in my personal opinion, that's kind of how I operate, but I kind of have to shift my personality a little bit when it comes to, working with new people. So whether it's just a new staff member to my current district, or if I were going into a brand new district, I would try and be visible. I would try and, start building those relationships first. And then that also helps kind of build that, hey, this new lady's not so bad kind of thing, exude, I'm here to help. And just start from there, just kind of start from the relationship part of it, and then just help out where you can.
What's maybe some quick advice for thinking again, specifically back to those teams, that community that you built to help you do your work as a coach? You had mentioned how those groups had already existed. They may have sort of lost their purpose. So whether another coach is in that that position where there's kind of this thing that exists, but they don't really have a purpose, or maybe they don't even have teacher teams to help them carry out kind of their goals that they've been tasked with as a coach. What might you suggest to somebody to help get something started, or re-get those like teacher teams and small communities back on track?
I think it probably in that type of situation, it might require starting perhaps with admin, talking and building a relationship with the administration and letting them see how structure could advance, their building's goals. For example, like I try to meet with our every principal at the end of the year and then also at the beginning of the year, just to say like, hey, what are your goals? How can I help you meet them? And if their goals for their building include some sort of way to kind of build that community, or you can obviously introduce that as well to the admin and say like, I think this could help you guys move forward. Then you can start that conversation as well. Why don't we, let's invite some teachers who you think would be great at moving this forward, who you think would be, great to have in on the conversation, or, an idea generator or whatever it is, whatever you think that person would be good at. Let's invite them in to have a conversation. Do we think this is a group that we'd like to have moving forward? Are you interested in joining? And then you can develop and decide the specifics behind that group or that committee later on, like how often do we meet, what times do we meet, those types of things, what are my job responsibilities. But I think it's going to start with that conversation that's like, this type of group could help us. I mean, even from everything from a tech committee to, we have sunshine committees here in our district that just like, they plan, Thirsty Thursdays or whatever, they plan out different things for the staff members just to get together and have a good time. We had a chili cook-off not long ago that they set up. We have for the Super Bowl, we have a super party at lunch. So we're all going to bring in soup and snacks and stuff like that. And so I think it depends on like what the vision is of that principal, like how do you see your district? If you're in there every day, I haven't been in here yet, I'm new to the district, you're out there every day, your staff, your teachers, what way do you want to drive positive growth? Okay, well, can we get a group of teachers, a core group, a select group, whatever it be, to help drive that change and, add to the conversation.
I love that. Great advice.
I have another question. I don't know if we're going to keep this one in. I just thought of it. Maybe we're going to have to cut it. But here's a really genuine question for you, right? We're building communities. You're working with humans. How do you deal with the drama? I mean, whenever you're working with teachers, whenever you work with groups of people, there's going to be drama. What do we do about that?
Absolutely. So I will say that in a former district of mine, I kind of had that. I saw that a little bit more often, and I think every district is going to have it to some in some regard. Some grade levels get along better than others, some work together better than others. Me personally, I try and stay out of the drama. As the coach, I'm supposed to be K-12. I'm supposed to be here to support you. So no matter what I think personally of the drama happening or whatever it is, if I'm even aware of it, usually I'm kind of blind to those things. I try and stay pretty positive on my side of the world, but if I am aware of those things, I don't engage. I'm not going to sit there and nitpick and complain, or we do our factor here at Monroe, BCDing, blame, complain, defend. You don't do those things, right? And so I try, I guess, and live by some of those things. But if that type of information or that type of drama comes my way, then what I do is I just try and steer it in a positive direction and say, okay, well, if that's how you're viewing this, then let's, fix it on your side of things, right? What can you do to make it a positive thing rather than, kind of harping back on, the issues at hand or whatever. So
I like that.
Thank you. I don't know if we're going to keep that question. I don't know if you're going to let me keep that question, but I just wanted to ask because that's a real question.
It really is. There are definitely a lot of teams that don't get together. I personally, back again in my old district, I had a teacher And she's part of the reason why, like, I kind of approach things the way I did now, because back then I was very business. I'd walk into a classroom and be like, did you do this yet? Or can I borrow this copy of something? You know what I mean? And she was always like, why can't you say hi first? And I was like, okay. So I've kind of taken that advice from her, essentially, even though it was not necessarily advice. It was more like headbutting at the time. I decided, I was like, well, if I'm going to be the role that I'm in, I can't just always be asking things of people or getting right down into the business and avoiding or ignoring the person behind the teacher. Right. So it's not necessarily, like I said, I'm more personally, I feel like I'm more naturally on the business side of things. And I've had to make it my own personal growth to really remember that, hey, let's have a 2-minute conversation about what they did this weekend, or hey, love your clothes, where did you find that? That kind of thing. Whatever it is, to try and build a connection in some way, I have to try and focus on that first.
That's awesome. Well, Andrea, this has been really great information. As you know from your first time around on the pod, we end all of our episodes with top 3 tips. So what are your top 3 tips for our listeners who are looking to, improve sort of a growth mindset, just kind of school-wide community, or even bring more of a focused teacher leader group to help them carry out your work? What would your top 3 tips be for building community?
So I think, like I was just talking about, I think the relationships are going to come first. So greeting that person first rather than the teacher, and like, hey, let's get right to it or whatever. Try and establish that trust, establish that relationship, so that word of mouth spreads or any of those types of things, because you want people on your side as well as you're trying to be on their side, right? In order to really drive change, you have to make sure that you're going to be somebody that, can get along with others, even if you don't necessarily would normally like hang out with them on a weekend or something like that. You still need to be able to get along, and establishing that relationship first, I think is an important thing. I also think meeting people where they're at. Like I said, not everybody's going to have the same vision that I do for the district or for even a specific unit, but understanding that they're the expert in their fields, I might be the expert in mine, and what we can do, we can work together and we can figure out a way forward with keeping both of those things in mind. And then finally, I think one of the biggest things for me, and especially that's a challenge that's I've been running into this past year, actually the last year and a half or so, is that building is not the same thing as sustaining. So I think it's important to really keep at it. So when you've run into challenges, or when something that you think you've set up doesn't necessarily continue operating in that same way, you're able to be flexible, and that you learn kind of how to keep it going despite those challenges.
That's huge.
So
I love that. Building isn't the same thing as sustaining. No, it is not.
No, I'm sure we could have a whole nother episode on sustaining. Andrea, are you done for another episode?
Yeah.
It sounds good. I'm here for it.
I love it. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm really excited for people to get to learn from you in a whole new way on this episode. And it's just always a joy getting to talk to you and have you on the pod.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a great time.
Yeah, and listeners, if you want to learn more from Andrea, or if you want to reach out to us, go to our social media, go to the episode description, see all of the important links that you will need from this episode. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and to rate our episodes. It helps a bunch if you leave us a nice review or a bad review, anything. Honestly, if you have feelings, we want to know. We are honest. Let us know what you think. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. All right.
Okay.
Awesome.
There we go. Yeah. Andrea, thank you very much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely. That was a good one.
Thanks for spending time with us today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with an educator friend.
And connect with us on social media at RRCoachCast to let us know what you thought of the episode and what topics you want us to discuss next.
New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts.
So press the restart button,
Recharge your coaching batteries, and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
a Tech Coach Collective.